The Count of Monte Cristo, Abridged Edition, by Alexandre Dumas. Chapter 1. Marseille, The Arrival. On the 24th of February, 1815, the watchtower of Notre-Dame de la Garde signaled the arrival of the three master Pharaohs from Smyrna, Trieste, and Naples. The usual crowd of curious spectators immediately filled the quay of Fort Saint-Jean, for at Marseille the arrival of a ship is always a great event, especially when that ship, as was the case with the Pharaoh, had been built, rigged, and laden in the dockyard of Old Phocia, and belongs to a ship owner of their own town. Meanwhile, the vessel drew on and was approaching the harbor under topsails, jib, and foresail, but so slowly and with such an air of melancholy that the spectators, always ready to sense misfortune, began to ask one another what ill luck had overtaken those on board. However, those experienced in navigation soon saw that if there had been any ill luck, the ship had not been the sufferer, for she advanced in perfect condition and under skillful handling. The anchor was ready to be dropped, the bowsprit with shrouds loose. Beside the pilot, who was steering the Pharaoh through the narrow entrance to the port, there stood a young man, quick of gesture and keen of eye, who watched every movement of the ship while repeating each of the pilot's orders. The vague anxiety that prevailed among the crowd affected one of the spectators so much that he could not wait until the ship reached the port. Jumping into a small boat, he ordered the boatman to row him alongside the Pharaoh, which he reached opposite the creek of La Reserve. On seeing this man approach, the young sailor left his post beside the pilot, and hat in hand, leant over the ship's bulwarks. He was a tall, lithe young man of about 20 years of age, with fine dark eyes and hair as black as ebony. His whole manner bespoke that air of calm resolution peculiar to those who, from their childhood, have been accustomed to face danger. "Ah, is that you, Dantès?" cried the man in the boat. "You are looking pretty gloomy on board. What has happened?" "A great misfortune, Monsieur Morel," replied the young man. "A great misfortune, especially for me. We lost our brave Captain Leclerc off Civita Vecchia." "What happened to him?" asked the ship owner. "What has happened to our worthy captain?" "He died of brain fever in dreadful agony. Alas, monsieur, the whole thing was most unexpected. After a long conversation with the harbour master, Captain Leclerc left Naples in a great state of agitation. In 24 hours he was in high fever and died 3 days afterwards. We performed the usual burial service. He is now at rest off the Isle of El Giglio, sewn up in his hammock with a 36-pounder shot at his head and another at his heels. We have brought home his sword and his cross of honor to his widow. But was it worth his while," added the young man with a sad smile, "to wage war against the English for 10 long years, only to die in his bed like everybody else?" "Well, well, Monsieur Edmond," replied the owner, who appeared more comforted with every moment. "We are all mortal, and the old must make way for the young, otherwise there would be no promotion. And the cargo?" "Is all safe and sound, Monsieur Morel, take my word for it. It has been a voyage that will bring you in a good 25,000 francs. As they were just past the round tower, the young man shouted out, "Ready there! Lower topsails, foresail, and jib!" The order was executed as promptly as on board a man-of-war. "Lower away and brail all!" At this last order, all the sails were lowered and the ship moved on almost imperceptibly. "And now, Monsieur Morel," said Dantès, "here is your purser, Monsieur Danglars, coming out of his cabin. If you will step on board, he will furnish you with every particular. I must look after the anchoring and dress the ship in mourning." The owner did not wait to be invited twice. He seized a rope which Dantès flung to him, and with an agility that would have done credit to a sailor, climbed up the ladder attached to the side of the ship, while the young man, returning to his duty, left the conversation to the individual whom he had announced under the name of Danglars, and who now came toward the owner. He was a man of 25 or 26, of unprepossessing countenance, obsequious to his superiors, insolent to his subordinates, and besides the fact that was the purser, and pursers are always unpopular on board, he was personally as much disliked by the crew as Edmond Dantès was beloved by them. "Well, Monsieur Morel," said Danglars, "you have heard of the misfortune that has befallen us." Yes, poor Captain Leclerc. He was a brave and honest man, and a first-rate seaman, grown old between sky and ocean, as a man should be who is entrusted with the interests of so important a firm as that of Morel and Son, replied Danglars. But, replied the owner, watching Danglars at his work, it seems to me that a sailor need not be so old to understand his business. Our friend Edmond seems to understand it thoroughly, and to require no instructions from anyone. Yes, said Danglars, casting a look of hatred on Dantès. Yes, he is young, and youth is never lacking in self-confidence. The captain was hardly dead when, without consulting anyone, he assumed command of the ship, and was the cause of our losing a day and a half off the Isle of Elba, instead of making direct for Marseilles. As captain's mate, it was his duty to take command, but he acted wrongly in losing a day and a half off Elba, unless the ship was in need of repair. The ship was as right as I am, and as I hope you are, Monsieur Morrel. It was nothing more than a whim on his part, and a fancy for going ashore that caused the delay off Elba. Dantès, called the owner, turning toward the young man, just step this way, will you? One moment, monsieur, he replied, and I shall be with you. Then turning to the crew, he called out, Let go! The anchor was instantly dropped, and the chain ran out with a great rattle. In spite of the pilot's presence, Dantès remained at his post until this last task was accomplished, and then he added, Lower the flag and pen it to half-mast and slip the yards. You see, said Danglars, he already imagines himself captain. And so he is, said his companion. Why should we not give him the post? I know he is young, but he seems to be an able and thoroughly experienced seaman. A cloud passed over Danglars' brow. Your pardon, Monsieur Morrel, said Dantès, approaching. Now that the boat is anchored, I am at your service. I believe you called me. Danglars retreated a step or two. I wish to know the reason of the delay off Elba. I'm unaware of the reason, monsieur. I only followed the last instructions of Captain Leclerc, who, when dying, gave me a packet for the Maréchal Bertrand. And did you see the Maréchal? Yes. Morrel glanced around him, and then drew Dantès on one side. How is the Emperor? He asked eagerly. Very well, so far as I could see. He came into the Maréchal's room while I was there. Did you speak to him? It was he who spoke to me, monsieur, said Dantès, smiling. He asked me some questions about the ship, about the time of her departure for Marseilles, the route she had followed, and the cargo she carried. I believe that had she been empty, and I the master, he would have bought her, but I told him I was only the mate, and that the ship belonged to the firm of Morel and Son. Ah, said he, I know the firm. The Morels have all been shipowners for generations, and there was a Morel who served in the same regiment with me when I was garrisoned at Valence. Quite true, Monsieur Morel exclaimed, delighted. It was Policar Morel, my uncle, who afterwards became a captain. Dantès, you must tell my uncle that the Emperor still remembers him, and you will see tears of joy in the old soldier's eyes. Well, he added, giving Dantès a friendly tap on the shoulder, you are quite right in carrying out Captain Leclerc's instructions and putting in at the Isle of Elba, though if it were known that you delivered a packet to the Maréchal and talked with the Emperor, you might get into trouble. How so? Said Dantès. I don't even know what the packet contained, and the Emperor merely made such inquiries as he would of any newcomer. But excuse me, monsieur, for one moment. Here are the medical and customs officers coming on board. As the young man departed, Danglars approached. Well, said he, it would seem that he has given you good reasons for dropping anchor off Porto Ferrajo. Most satisfactory ones, dear Monsieur Danglars. So much the better, replied the purser, for it is never pleasant to see a comrade neglect his duty. Dantès certainly did his, and there is nothing more to be said on the matter. It was Captain Leclerc who ordered him to call at Elba. Talking of Captain Leclerc, hasn't Dantès given you a letter from him? No. Was there one for me? I think that in addition to the packet, Captain Leclerc gave him a letter. What packet do you mean, Danglars? The one Dantès delivered at Port Ferrajo. How do you know that he had a packet for Port Ferrajo? Danglars turned red. I was passing the captain's door, which was ajar, and saw him give Dantès the packet and the letter. He has not mentioned a letter to me, but if he has one, I have no doubt he will give it to me. Then, Mr. Morrel, pray don't mention it to Dantès. Perhaps I am mistaken. Just then the young man returned, and Danglars retreated as before. Well, Dantès, have you finished now? Yes, monsieur. Then you can come and dine with us. I beg you to excuse me, Monsieur Morrel. I owe my first visit to my father. All the same, I greatly appreciate the honor you pay me. You are quite right, Dantès. I know you are a good son. And do you know if my father is quite well? He asked with some hesitation. Oh, I believe so, my dear Edmond, but I have not seen him lately. At any rate, I am sure that he is not wanted for anything during your absence. Dantès smiled. My father is proud, monsieur, and even had he been in want of everything. I doubt whether he would have asked anything of anybody except God. Well then, after this first visit has been paid, may we count on you? Once more, I must ask you to excuse me, Monsieur Morel. There is yet another visit which I am most anxious to pay. True, Dantès, I had forgotten that there is at the Catalans someone who is waiting you with as much impatience as your father, the fair Mercedes. Dantès smiled. Well, well, said the shipowner, now I understand why she came to me 3 times for news of the Pharaon. Upon my word, Edmond, you are to be envied. She is a handsome girl. But don't let me keep you any longer. You have looked after my affairs so well that it is but your due that you should now have time to look after your own. Are you in need of money? Oh, no, thank you, monsieur. I have all my pay from the voyage. That's nearly 3 months' salary. You're a very careful fellow, Edmond. Say rather that I have a poor father. Yes, yes, I know you are a good son. Off you go to your father. I too have a son, and I should be very angry with anyone who kept him away from me after a 3 months' voyage. I have your leave, monsieur? Said the young man, saluting. Yes, if you have nothing more to say to me. Oh, by the way, before Captain Leclerc died, did he not give you a letter for me? He was unable to write, monsieur, but that reminds me, I shall have to ask you for a fortnight's leave. To get married? First of all, and then for a journey to Paris. Very well, take what time you need. It will take us quite 6 weeks to unload the cargo, and we shall not be ready to put to sea again for another 3 months. But you must be back in 3 months, for the Pharaon cannot sail without her captain, he added, patting the young sailor on the back. Without her captain, did you say? Cried Dantès, his eyes sparkling with joy. Oh, if you really mean that, monsieur, you are touching on my fondest hopes. Is it really your intention to make me captain of the Pharaon? If it depended on me alone, my dear Dantès, I should give you my hand saying it is settled. But I have a partner, and you know the Italian proverb, Chi ha compagna ha padrone. But half the battle is won since you already have my vote. Leave it to me to get my partner's vote for you. Now off you go. I shall remain here a while and go over the accounts with Danglars. By the by, were you satisfied with him on the voyage? That depends on what you mean by that question. If you mean as a comrade, I must say no, for I do not think he has been my friend ever since the day I was foolish enough to propose to him that we should stop for 10 minutes at the Isle of Monte Cristo to settle a little dispute. I never ought to have made the suggestion, and he was quite right in refusing. If you mean as purser, I have nothing to say against him, and I think you will be satisfied with the way in which he has discharged his duties. Thereupon the young sailor jumped into the boat, seated himself in the stern, ordered the oarsmen to put him ashore at the Canebière. With a smile on his lips, Monsieur Morel glanced after him till he saw him jump ashore. There he was immediately lost in the motley crowd that, from 5 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock in the evening, collects in that famous street of the Canebière, of which the modern Phoenicians were so proud that they say in all seriousness, and with that peculiar accent which lends so much character to what they say, if Paris owned the Canebière, she would be a little Marseille. On turning round, the shipowner saw Danglars standing behind him. The latter, who had appeared to be awaiting his orders, was in reality like him, following the movements of the young sailor. But how different was the expression in the eyes of each of these 2 men as they gazed after Dante's retreating figure.